Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Meant to have this video up for you guys yesterday. I was going to do a car phone video, a reaction right after the game. Unfortunately, my phone was at about 5%. Forgot to bring the car charger. Didn't get home till about 8 o'clock after I ate dinner with Greg, and there was a lot of traffic coming back. And by that point, I was exhausted. So I figured I'd try to do a video for you guys on my lunch break. And I'm going to go live tonight to talk in further detail about the start for the 7-2 New York Giants. I know a lot of you guys may be excited. I know a lot of you guys may have some questions about the team going forward. But the Giants are 7-2. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. This team continues to find ways to win games, regardless of who the opponent is, regardless of who they're going up against. So I was thrilled that the New York Giants got a win. In terms of my experience at the game, I had an absolute blast. Got to hang out with Justin, Nikki Snacks, and their entire tailgate crew before the game. That was a lot of fun, getting to hang out with them, getting to go to the game, getting to see my second straight win, being in attendance for a Giants game last year. I went to the Eagles game in which we beat them. So it was great. The Giants did exactly what I thought they would do, at least from an offensive standpoint throughout this game. And we'll get further into detail about that. But I just had a blast. I had a great time. The atmosphere at the game was as loud as I've been in attendance for. And I'm sure there's probably been louder games this year. But for me personally, it's as loud as I've seen Giants Stadium in a while. And you kind of expect that. The team's off to a really good start. We haven't been a good football team for a really long time. So to be there for that atmosphere, hear the crowd on third down, make noise, definitely played a factor. I think there was one crucial penalty, if I recall. Again, you're never going to get the same perspective when you're at the game as when you watch it on TV. So my, recollection with some things and my breakdown of some things aren't going to be nearly as good as if I watch the game on TV like I normally do with you guys. But I think there was one play late in the game where there's a big third down where they may have had a full start or a delay of game. And I think that was definitely crowd influence. So the crowd had their impact throughout this game. But the Giants continue to do what they do best. And if they're going to continue to win football games, it's going to be what they're going to have to continue to do. This next week going up against the Lions, I see a lot of Giants fans on Twitter. A lot of Giants fans have commented to me, the Giants are going to have to put up 30-plus points to beat the Detroit Lions. I don't believe that to be the case. The New York Giants need to continue to do what they do best. They need to force the Detroit Lions to play a brand of football that the New York Giants prefer to play. And that means they're going to need to continue to dominate the time of possession. I'm not saying run the ball 47 times and only throw it 17 times. That's going to be dictated on your opponent. It's going to be dictated on game flow. You have to take what the defense gives you, but the Giants need to chew up clock. They need to continue to be good in terms of third down defense and third down offense, something that they were very good at in this game. And they need to continue to punch it in for 7 when they get into the red zone. I think they had 2 red zone touchdowns in this game. So they did a good job in that area as well. He hit Cage early in the game. Of course, Saquon punched it in. And, of course, we had the big Darius Slayton touchdown catch as well. I also want to talk about the Saquon Barkley contract details. We'll talk about that after the game breakdown and give my full opinion on that and where I could see that potentially leading and what it may mean for Barkley and the New York Giants long term. But let's talk about the game in itself and some of the individual playmakers in this game. Before we do that, let me just pull up I always like to go over the team stats more so than the individual stats. I think that's important when you go over these games. We'll start with the team stats. Jones, very efficient. I think he had 153 QB rating. He was 13 of 17. Obviously, the Giants didn't ask him to do a whole lot, which I didn't think they would, going up against the league's worst run defense in football. For the Giants to win this game, I think you wanted to rely on Saquon Barkley's legs, which is exactly what they did. Some Giants fans may look at the usage and say, wow, we can't continue to do that. And I agree, 35 carries is a lot. But coming off the bye, I'm not surprised that they gave Barkley a little bit added workload. Expect them to probably dial that back a little bit next week, maybe use Breida a little bit more. And I don't think we'll run nearly as much. We'll still be at least probably 50% in terms of, run to pass. But this was more like 75%. It was 47-17. So I don't expect the Giants to run nearly as much next week. But coming off the bye, going up against this specific opponent, I could see it making sense for Barkley to get a ton of carries. I didn't expect 35, but if you would have told me before the game 28-30, I would have said, yeah, that's probably what I expect going into this game, being that we're going to try to limit mistakes, which is what we did. We didn't turn the football over. We were able to force 2 turnovers, and if we're going to win games, that's what we need to continue to do. We can't afford to turn the ball over, right? You go back to the previous week, we turned the ball over. Richie James, 2 fumbles. That was probably the defining factor as to why the New York Giants ended up losing that football game. In this game, we took care of the ball. We controlled the clock. And when you look at the time of possession stats, which we'll get to in a minute, yeah, that's the strength of this football team. That's what Brian Daboll realizes this team needs to do in order to continue to win. Darius Slayton, 3 catches, 95 yards. Obviously, the big play was the touchdown where he broke the tackle. I thought Jones, again, from where I'm standing, You guys get a better view on the TV. But from where I was when I watched the game, it looked like Jones did a hell of a job avoiding the blitz and being able to get that ball out when he did. And then Slayton, of course, made the play when he was able to break the tackle and go down the sideline and get in for 6, which I think from what they showed on the scoreboard was the longest touchdown. I believe it was at MetLife Stadium in a number of years, 54 yards on that play for Slayton. But that was the big play of the game for the Giants from an offensive standpoint. Hodgins had a couple of nice catches. He had 41 yards. From a negative standpoint, sure, Kenny Golladay was bad. Kenny Golladay had one drop, and he may have, I think it was only, he had 2 targets. One was certainly a drop. The other one may have been a drop. I can't recall, but regardless, had 0 yards. And I don't think he was used too much in the second half after he had that crucial drop. Wan'Dale was used sparingly. Again, we didn't throw a whole lot. We only had 17 passing attempts, so I didn't expect these guys to have tremendous statistics, but it was good to see Slayton continues to thrive for the New York Giants. At this point, I think it's safe to say he's our number one option in the passing game. From a defensive standpoint, Dexter Lawrence continues to eat up the middle. Dexter Lawrence continues. He had another sack. Leonard Williams played a very good game as well on that defensive line. So the interior defensive line certainly stood out to me. Kayvon, didn't really see him too much in terms of making much of an impact. Had a couple of nice downfield tackles, but yeah, didn't look like he was getting too much pressure. The majority of the pressure came from Big Dex and Leonard Williams up the middle. They did a tremendous job. The coverage, I think the Giants, that's certainly going to continue to be a problem for this team, which is even more of a reason why we need to continue to dominate in the time of possession. And sure, you look at the stats, you say we only gave up 16 points, but we allowed the Texans to really go down the field at will for their last 3, maybe even 4 drives in this contest. We were opportunistic. We were able to come up with some turnovers, but going up against some better offenses, namely a team like Detroit next week, who's better than Houston, the Giants are going to have to do a better job defensively. But you really saw that, yeah, we did struggle at times in coverage, giving up big plays, where I thought we did a really good job in this game, which I actually worried about a lot coming in based off of our run defense, was against the run. Sure, Pierce had that one big run of 44 yards, but outside of that, 16 carries, 54 yards. So I thought we did a good job keeping him in check and keeping that Houston Texans ground attack in check. You look at the final numbers, 19 carries, 101 yards, which is, just over 5 yards a carry. But again, you take away that one big splash play, we held them, 18 team carries for what, 57 yards. So they didn't do too much, against us on the ground. We did give up some big plays in the passing game. And the one thing that I really didn't like from a team defensive standpoint was when we scored a touchdown or 2 touchdowns in a row, the defense, like I said, allowed them to march right down the field, gave up a touchdown on the first drive. And then the second drive, they were certainly trending towards getting another touchdown until such time, I believe, we recovered that fumble. And then, of course, Dane Belton came up with an interception later in the game. So the defense did the job, but I think there's definitely some things that you want to be looking at and you may be worried about going forward with this defense with some of the more challenging teams we're going to have on our schedule. What this team did really well, both from a defensive and offensive standpoint. First, you look at the third down efficiency. Houston only 3 of 10, so the defense continues to thrive in that area. The Giants, 50% on third down conversions. That's a great number, especially when you have 14 opportunities. That's right where you want to be at if you're the New York Giants. So we continue to do very well in that area. We've gotten better and better and better for the most part. Last week, we didn't do too well, but we've gotten better from an offensive standpoint on third down conversions week over week over week as the season has progressed. And then the other major thing you always look at is the time possession. And once again, the Giants won right around 7 minutes. And that seems to be their sweet spot over the last 4 or 5 games. It's usually about 33 to 27, 33 and change to 26 and change. And same thing we did last game, even though we lost because of the turnovers against Seattle. That's the magic formula for this team, and it's old school football, but it's a winning formula for this New York Giants team. They realize they have warts on this roster. They don't have the best of weapons in the wide receiving core. They need to dominate the time of possession. They need to limit mistakes. They need to limit turnovers. Daniel Jones has done a great job at that this year overall. And that's a major reason why the New York Giants are 7-2. A lot of people are going to discount that. Not every quarterback can do that. Daniel Jones has not thrown an interception for 6 weeks. That's with limited wide receiver help. That's with at best, average offensive line, at least in my opinion. That's, I guess, up for interpretation and your opinion on the matter. But he's done a really good job in terms of taking care of the football. And sure, is it a game manager? Yeah, you could say that. But you can't really expect many quarterbacks to be more than a game manager with the current roster that the New York Giants have. So I think Jones continues to do very well. I mean, he had a near perfect QB rating this game. He got you 2 touchdowns. The Giants operated well from within the red zone. I don't have the red zone stats in front of me, but I know we scored twice when we got inside the 20. So we continue to do a good job there. And The Giants played a clean game and they came out with a win. The other thing, for the first time all year, we had a 2-possession lead. Not used to that if you're a New York Giants fan, right? We had two separate possession leads. After Houston scored, we got another 2-possession lead, and we probably would have won this game by 2 possessions had they not gotten that late field goal late in the game. But regardless, we won by probably about what we should have, about 8 points coming off the bye. So it was good to see that the Giants came out with a good approach. And against Detroit, I expect a similar approach. I don't expect it to be so one-sided in terms of run to pass, but I expect it to be 50-50. We cannot get into a track meet with the Detroit Lions. That's what they want us to do. We have to continue to rely on Barkley, maybe utilize Jones's legs a bit more in the next game, maybe involve Breida as well. And Jones needs to continue to come up with timely plays like he did in this game. He had a couple of huge, crucial third down conversions from within this game. So overall, the Giants continue to do what they've done all year. Jones is clutching the big third down spots. Barkley continues to carry the load with this offense and continues to be the one incredible playmaker. Darius Slayton certainly stepped up for sure the last couple of weeks. He had a great game, probably had the play of the game from an offensive standpoint. And the offensive line did a good job in terms of run blocking. Jones, I think, was sacked 3 times. You don't like seeing that, especially factoring in that he only had 17 pass attempts. But overall, from an offensive standpoint, it's what I expected. We know we're not a team that's going to, spread it out and go 5 wide. We need to help out our offensive line as much as we can. You're going to have a lot of 2 tight end sets, and we're going to try to control the pace of play. 21 to 24 points is exactly where you want this New York Giants team to be from an offensive standpoint. If we're hitting that number and we're controlling the clock and we're not turning the ball over, we're either going to win or we're going to be right in the thick of it up until the very end. And much like every week this year, the New York Giants continue to do that, and I expect them to come out with a similar game plan against the Detroit Lions. So thrilled as a New York Giants fan. How could you not be? We're 7-2, and now you see a game next week against Detroit where I think we should get to 8-2. On top of that, the Dallas Cowboys lost, which was great news as well. But really happy right now as a New York Giants fan. I'm really happy with the development of this roster. I'm very happy with Daniel Jones. Very happy, obviously, with Saquon Barkley. And I think both those guys continue to trend towards being part of the 2023 roster. But we're going to have to wait and see how the offseason plays out. And that, of course, was a major, major storyline this week with Saquon Barkley. Joe Schoen came out and talked about how he's going to ask some of the players to come in for contract negotiations. He didn't name anybody by name specifically that he was going to bring in, but we found out, I think 2 or 3 days ago, that Saquon Barkley was one of those players. He went on to talk about some of the things that he had to say regarding the negotiations with Joe Schoen, but I think it's a positive development regardless of what Barkley had to say, regardless of the fact that they couldn't come to terms on a contract. The fact that Schoen's even talking to him and trying to work this out leads you to believe that he wants Saquon Barkley back. It's going to come down to negotiating. And generally speaking, when it comes to negotiations, you meet in the middle. Saquon Barkley's going to have his price. He's going to set his price where he wants to be. Joe Schoen's going to say, no, we're not willing to go past this number. And in the end, they'll probably have to meet somewhere in the middle and come to a fair negotiation, by both parties. Of course, Schoen could always utilize the franchise tag. I don't think Barkley will play on that, as I've said several times, but you could use it as a negotiation tactic. So you're the only team that could negotiate with him, similar to what the Titans did with Derrick Henry. In terms of what Barkley had to say regarding the contract, is what he had to say. I'm just happy what we were able to at least have a conversation, he said. I know how they feel about me. They spoke very highly of me, but like I said, we weren't able to get anything done during the bye week. And I agree with Joe. Just lock it up and worry for the rest of the season and make sure no distractions come out of it. We got into a little bit of conversation, Barkley told reporters. At the end of the day, I put it in the past. That was the bye week. Obviously, we weren't able to come to an agreement during the bye week, and my mindset is just focus on the rest of the season. Next week going against Detroit, and knowing when that opportunity comes up again, focus on it then. So he's basically saying at the end of the year, we'll go back to our negotiations. We've set the mark where we feel where I should be and where they currently feel they value me, and we'll try to come to a negotiation. An agreement, rather. Then later went on to say this. I think I've kind of been very vocal before contracts were even brought up about how I feel about this place, what I want my legacy to be in this place. And I want to be a Giant for life, he said. Like I said, I've been vocal about that. So if the conversation gets brought up again, we'll go from there. And you expect Saquon Barkley to say that. He's going to try to get as much money as he possibly can. And I'm sure in his heart of hearts, he wants to remain a New York Giant. But at the end of the day, if somebody's willing to give him a ton of money, the Giants obviously have to be wary of that, which I think in the end is why the Giants are going to franchise tag Saquon Barkley if they can't come to an agreement before free agency hits, but not with the intention of him playing out on the tag. I think they want to do right by Saquon, but they want to do right by the Giants as well. They don't want to overcommit to Barkley. They realize he has an injury history. They realize he plays a position that has a short shelf life, and they're going to have to come to a fair agreement. As I've said all along, I don't think he's going to get a Zeke deal. He's not getting 6 years on a contract. The question is, how far is Shane willing to go in terms of a commitment? Are you willing to pay a little bit more than the per year average in terms of what he should be valued at as a player to get a shorter commitment? Or are you willing to go a little bit longer of a commitment to keep him in-house with the New York Giants, and maybe he takes a little bit less than what he feels like he's valued at on a per year basis to get that extra year of commitment? It'll be interesting how the negotiations play out. I think in the end, he's going to be back with the Giants, provided he stays healthy the rest of the year. He's just played way too well. He's played at an MVP level. He's carried this offense. He's a great locker room guy. You're starting to build up this locker room, and I think he's going to be a valuable piece for this team going forward. I think Joe Schoen has identified him as that with some of the quotes that have come out. I think they'll franchise tag him, and then they'll negotiate, and in the end, they'll come to a 3 or 4 year agreement. A 3-year agreement would be a 2-year commitment. A 4-year agreement would be a 3-year commitment, because you could generally get out of these contracts a year earlier. I think in the end, it'll be 4 years with a 3-year commitment, because if you're Barkley, what's really this incentive to only have a 2-year commitment? At that point, I would advise him to just play in the franchise tag if he's going to play and hit free agency next year and strike it big, or force the Giants to give you, even more money in terms of the franchise tag on the second year. So I think it's going to take 4 years, as I've said all along, with a 3-year commitment, something in the ballpark of 4 years, 56, 4 years, $60 million. That's where I think his market's going to be. That's where I think the New York Giants are going to agree upon. Where do I think Barkley is right now? I think he wants a 6-year deal. But in the end, I think he's going to have to come back a little bit and meet the Giants in the middle. That's how I see it playing out. Listen, I'm just a fan, but that's my opinion on the matter. I think it's going to be a 4-year, 56, 4-year, $60 million deal. And in the end, I think the New York Giants will retain Saquon Barkley. And in the end, I think they will retain Daniel Jones. The question is going to be the length of these contracts and who they're going to push forward with. But regardless, we'll talk about next year. Right now, this team's 7-2. And right now, this team is staring the playoffs right in the face. And they know as this team grows, they're learning more and more how they, as a football team, how they have to play in order to win football games. And they know their identity, and I expect them to continue that throughout the rest of the season. And listen, if you could run the football at the pace that they've been able to do on a weekly basis outside of that Seattle game, you're going to give yourselves an opportunity to win regardless of who you're playing. The question is, are you going to be able to do that when you go up against some of the better teams like the Eagles, the Cowboys, so on and so forth? And we'll be put to the test then. But for now, just be happy. We're 7-2. I'll talk to you guys tonight. Hopefully you're enjoying your Victory Monday. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.